read the lore. All right, Carmina Mora. Here we go, the backstory. Settle in, everybody. Carmina Mora was a gifted artist who carried the guilt of her young brother's death. Growing up in a rugged coastal village in southern Chile, she sketched the sublime landscapes of Patagonia. Sitting outside, she painted dramatic fjords while feeding the crows nested in the tree next to the house. Now, we've learned already that there aren't actually any crows in Chile, so this is an alternate reality where crows actually exist in Chile, but just go with it, okay? She grew up carrying the guilt of her mother's sudden departure. Her father blamed Carmina for her mother's abandonment, which added to her grief. She became the caretaker of Mateus, her little brother, despite still being a child herself. A year later, Carmina was painting with Mateus outside when the telephone rang. That was who was on the phone. Her father remained in the yard drinking his beer. Carmina rushed to the house to answer the phone and hung up a few seconds later. When she returned outside, Mateus was nowhere to be seen. She asked her father, but he had paid no attention to Mateus. She called her brother's name, looking for him everywhere, and while searching, she saw a bright red coat floating on the narrow creek by the house. Mateus' jacket. Oh no. She jumped into the creek and found him floating on the surface with vacant eyes unblinking. He had fallen and drowned. Oh my word. That's tragic. Her scream tore the sky. Her father found Carmina sobbing on the creek shore, clutching her brother's body in her arms, surrounded by a murder of crows. Her father snatched Mateus' body away from her, and she cried until her voice broke. The following morning, the world was cloaked in darkness. Her father did not say a word because he did not have to. Carmina knew it was all her fault. Months passed, yet her loss was as fresh as morning dew. Crippled with self-loathing, she could no longer paint. Without Mateus, life had no meaning. On the bleak morning of Mateus's birthday, Carmina walked to a narrow bridge several blocks away from home. She was convinced that nothing could bring her relief. Her mother was gone, her brother was dead, and her father blamed her for it all. She was convinced that she had nothing left to live for. Carmina walked to the railing of the bridge that stood over the turbulent river. Locals had nicknamed the spot Death Leap. Several cars drove by Carmina, but none stopped. No one seemed to care. She climbed over the railing, and her legs wobbled as she stood on the lip of the bridge. She looked down, watching the fierce river smash into a giant boulder, and she closed her eyes. See you soon, Mateus. Suddenly, a cacophony, I don't know how to say this word. Cacophony of cause filled the sky. Carmina opened her eyes and saw a black cloud of feathers flying toward her. The cloud split open and glossy black crows dove from the sky. One landed on her shoulder and stared intently into Carmina's eyes as if peering into her soul. Her grip on the railing loosened and the crow cawed raucously. Carmina stared at the crow, confused. Another crow landed on the railing, and then another. Soon a flock of crows were covering the railing of the bridge, staying close to her. She felt their heavy stare on her, calculative and enigmatic, as if they were assessing her. She looked down for a second, and a thunder of caws interrupted her dark impulse. The crows seemed to care about her well-being. As she dangled over the edge with the wind blowing through her raven hair, Carmina felt akin to them. For the first time since Mateus had died, Carmina did not feel alone. She returned home, giving life another chance. The crows left, but Carmina suspected that if anything happened to her, they would return. Inspired by her ordeal, Carmina picked up a brush. In the weeks that followed, she painted her experience using black ink to depict the death leap with a black cloud of feathers, the murder of crows that saved her life. The experience was transformative and launched her signature black ink surrealist art. After several years, some color pierced the darkness, and this shift of medium expanded her art form. She painted large-scale murals on busy street corners, designed grandiose costumes, and recited militant poetry. Carmina's art displayed local, intimate tragedies on a large scale, making them impossible to ignore. And everywhere she performed, crows followed. Her performances grew bold and drew the attention of artists who found her style invigorating. She grew close to a group of painters who understood her iconoclastic vision. Her performances launched the large-scale surrealist movement, which became a phenomenon. Her renown grew enough to attract the commission of a multinational enterprise, the VAC label. That's an anagram for Black Veil, right? The VAC label? You can't fool me, huh? Carmina investigated the group, discovering that they gifted art pieces to select disreputable congressmen. VAC's commissioned artists seems to disappear. VAC's commissioned artists seem to disappear afterward. Determined to expose the group's link to corrupt politics, Carmina accepted VAC's commission. The following week, Carmina painted a giant mural on a cemetery's columbarium, displaying the VAC label logo as the surrealist Grim Reaper harvesting the fields of Chilean families. Uh-oh, they ain't gonna like that. She wore a theatrical dress as she painted, on which she had stitched a poem about political revolution. Holy cow, this is kind of accurate to what I said about her politics interfered with Black Veil. Okay. The Pierce sparked a radical debate about corruption. The controversy painted a target on Carmina's back. After receiving anonymous death threats, she took refuge in her father's house, bringing along her closest friends for safety. That night, a gang of masked gunmen broke into the house. They swiftly subdued Carmina and her friends, threw them in a van, and drove off. The following morning, a dry breeze blew sand on Carmina's face, awakening her. She was seated in a chair in the middle of the desert, with her legs tied and her hands handcuffed. Her friends were lying on the ground, tied up. A shadow fell over her face, and Carmina looked up. A man dressed in a long robe with his face hidden in a dark hood approached her. He pulled a silvery knife from his robe. He grabbed her hands and recited a hymn in an unfamiliar language, and Carmina held his gaze. He paused and brought down his blade with a sudden blow. She cried in agony as her friends woke to a terrible sight. Carmina's severed hands falling in the sand. Oh my God. The hooded man smiled in satisfaction. How are you gonna paint now? Carmina cursed and screamed at him, wriggling against her bonds. The man grabbed Carmina's chin, and she spit in his face. He grunted and pried her mouth open, pulling out her tongue. Oh my God. Carmina struggled against her handcuffs. In a violent blow, he chopped off Carmina's tongue. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, but how did she struggle against her handcuffs exactly if she doesn't have hands anymore? It's like, well, I'm free from the handcuffs now because I don't have hands anymore. Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh. She howled in anguish. The man wiped his blade on his robe, leaving a trail of blood. How are you going to recite your poems now? Man, this guy is not playing around. He does not like that she caused problems for them. Sorrow welled in Carmina's chest, sharper than pain. Overwhelmed by uncontrollable rage, grief and loss overcame her senses. She had lost her little brother, and she had lost the only way to cope with such pain. Carmina screamed like on the day her brother died. Raucous caws echoed through the wasteland. The sky was obscured by a cyclone of dark clouds. Black feathers fell on Carmina's bleeding arms. She looked up and saw a torrent of crows erupting from the clouds, diving on the hooded man. As the ravenous crows pecked at his flesh mercilessly, Carmina smiled, watching her surrealist art come to life. But her heart lurched with rage when she saw the crows move on to their next target, her friends on the ground. Oh my. She screamed as waves of pain, guilt, and fright overwhelmed her. But it was in vain. The ravenous crows were uncontrollable, and darkness fell over her eyes as her friend's agonizing screams grew more acute. Death was coming again. Death was coming, and again, it was her fault. A deep black fog engulfed her. The survivor can repel the swarm by completing the repel action or entering a locker. During this time, the swarm's aura is not shown to the killer. A survivor being swarmed will receive damage if hit by a second dire crow. So you mean this could be like, you know, I don't know, this, for example, sending a swarm of bees at somebody and you can see where the bees are and they're like, ah, bees. Was this a prototype for Candyman? Grim embrace. Your act of servitude to the entity has not gone unnoticed. Each time a survivor is hooked for the first time, you gain a token. Upon reaching 4 tokens, Grim Embrace activates. The entity blocks all generators for 20 seconds, and the obsession's aura is revealed to you for 4 seconds. Oh, wow. Pain resonance. Overwhelming pain reverberates outwards into chaos. Anytime a survivor is hooked on a scourge hook, the generator with the most progress explodes, instantly losing 9% progress and will start to regress. Survivors repairing the generator will scream, revealing their location. So we got a couple of anti-gen perks here for the people who say gens go too fast. Pentimento. You reveal the true power of totems hidden within their remains. You see the aura of destroyed totems. You can perform a ritual on a destroyed totem to resurrect it as a rekindled totem? Should have done the bones, huh? Well, yeah, I did the bones too. Look at this. The more rekindled totems that exist, the greater their effects. 1 rekindled totem reduces survivors' repair speed by 20%. Holy moly. 2 rekindled totems reduces survivors' healing by 20%. 3 rekindled totems reduces survivors' recovery speed from being down by 20%. 4 rekindled totems reduces survivors' exit gate opening speed by 20%. And 5 rekindled totems. All totems are blocked by the entity forever. When a rekindled totem is removed, its remains are consumed by the entity. Wow. The other stages are not even worth it. It does seem like a lot of effort to go through. Killers don't have time to be looking for all these totems. Interesting. All right, who's ready to read lore for another 20 minutes? Jonah Vasquez saw the truth behind the veil. His gifted mind understood numbers in a way few could. Sunsets, architecture, a blade of grass. He saw more within them than eyes could gleam. He understood the language that explained them. Mathematics, complex equations that continually played out around the universe to determine why and how we exist. Structures, patterns, a law unbroken, physics. His gift would have been overlooked had his family's history of poverty continued for another generation. But some patterns are meant to deviate from their common course, and Jonah's father strived to better his family with every muscle he had. What started as a job picking fruit near Fresno, California, eventually led him to owning a small mangrove. It wasn't much, but it was enough to provide Jonah a stable childhood and education. Though placed in advanced classes, there were few signs of Jonah's brilliance to his peers. He was a normal boy with a few close friends, a passion for baseball, and an interest in ancient civilizations. However, when he was alone, his mind turned to numbers, and these, to Jonah, were the most fascinating of marvels. He delved into Fibonacci and, I don't know this one, Recomend's sequences, and was soon poring over complex equations from history's leading mathematicians. And on his 16th birthday, he received an unaddressed card. There was nothing within it but the following numbers. These are the error numbers from the Fresno website. Wow. It was a puzzle, perhaps a gift from his math teacher or a relative who knew of his penchant for solving brain teasers, but somehow this was different. While he immediately recognized the GPS coordinates, quickly discovering that they led to a location in Chile, the other numbers meant nothing to him Every attempt he made led to failure. Over time, he abandoned the puzzle, convinced it was flawed. He went on to university, and upon graduation was hired as a code breaker by the CIA. And on his first day, written in his employee handbook were the numbers from years ago. 825, 1944, 1. These are the numbers you had to put in the hatch on Lost, right? No. Okay, a tension in the back of his neck materialized. Dharma Initiative! Let's see. A feeling that he was being toyed with. He returned to the puzzle only to discover that his years of experience would reveal no new information. He couldn't dwell on it. He had a job to do. He was put to work deciphering messages from signal stations around Europe. Archive footage found that for 23 years, dozens had been operating in an unknown capacity. Simple blinks of light hid complex codes that revealed disjointed information. Wasn't much to go on, but he discovered the messages seemed to involve powerful and wealthy individuals from around the globe. Is he going to get tied up with the Black Veil too? The project was abruptly shut down. All agents involved were transferred to other assignments. Jonah was moved to a covert task force in the newly formed democracy of Guantanamo, where he intercepted and decoded messages from bands of rebels. His work enabled the U.S. to target numerous rebel locations, and then the bombs dropped. It was discovered too late that the messages were decoys. Civilian casualties were staggering, the true numbers covered up by officials, and Jonah blamed himself. He saw firsthand the damage done and the families torn apart. He took a leave of absence but remained in Guantanamo, surveying the damage. He had to do something. He cashed in his favors with one of the CIA's digital security experts and infiltrated the rebellion's computer network, and from there he took stock of the numbers and made changes he thought no one would notice. Small amounts of money were siphoned from the rebels to those who lost their homes and loved ones. It seemed like a smooth play, undetectable and bloodless, until the day the gunshots rang through his suite. Jonah hit the floor as glass shattered and holes punched through his walls. Grabbing his laptop, he broke his kitchen window and leapt to the neighboring building's roof. Before he could even rub his throbbing ankles, the small house exploded into flames. He ran, not looking back. He climbed down to the alley, made his way to the slums, and concealed himself among rickety shanties of cardboard and rotting wood. A week later, he arrived at an American embassy, exhausted, dust-ridden, and defeated. Before he could take a breath, he received a call from his chief officer at the CIA. Was it worth it? You over this crusade of yours? He felt powerless, and so he returned his focus to what was simple, what was black and white, numbers. His chief officer gave him a new assignment, one classified to all but a few. His research on the signal stations had reached someone high up, and the project was reopened under a veil of secrecy. Jonah dedicated his time to deciphering the codes, partly out of fascination and partly to forget the guilt that resided within him. And what started with signal stations led him to something even more baffling: horror podcasts. Wait a minute, is this about Hattie? In the stories of campfire thrillers and slasher tales from around the world were carefully conceived codes. Sometimes numbers, sometimes words, each time as if being a secret password or handshake. He found the following message: sacrifice is rebirth. Hidden in the code was information on a network of powerful people, all working towards what he didn't know. There was the chatter of summonings and rebirths, sacrifices and hunts. Jonah assumed much of it was red herrings attempting to mislead. Up late that night, he analyzed another code, this time concealed in a story of vampires. Okay, this is definitely about Hattie Cower and her brother's horror podcasts, because they found a vampire. What he deciphered sent a chill through his spine. Those numbers. The numbers had returned. They haunted him. He saw them when he closed his eyes. They clung to his sleepless mind, begging for attention. He checked the coordinates as he had years ago. It was nothing but a Chilean graveyard. He logged into the CIA database and searched the history of the location. Only one hit came up, a cold case where bodies were found in the area. The corpses eaten by hundreds of crows. Wow, okay. Jonah couldn't let the mystery go any longer. The numbers had followed him all his life, and he was ready to follow them. Knowing his chief officer wouldn't approve, he booked a ticket to Chile without anyone's knowledge. It was time to see what was so special about the coordinates. Less than 24 hours later, he arrived at the coordinates and he found himself under the sweltering sun, standing in the graveyard of a ghost town. Oh! Oh, man. It might not be Candyman, but that still feels pretty good. That still feels pretty damn good. Yeah. There was nothing but dust and bones. Jonah spit into the dirt and puzzled over the numbers once more. He slumped next to an old grave under the eyes of a watchful crow. He missed home. He missed the mangrove. He missed the time before the complexities of the universe crashed down on him. He looked out at the old derelict buildings on one side and the sweeping desert on the other. Man, I'm so happy I researched this area. There were similarities to Fresno, the dry heat, the sunset that cast an orange glow on the dusty ground, but it wasn't home. Not to him. He looked at it from the eyes of a man who didn't belong in this place. And then Jonah understood. He was analyzing the code from his own experiences, his own view of the world. There was so much he overlooked. With feverish devotion, he considered what the numbers could signify for other cultures. Ancient Egyptian measurements, Persian currencies, and antiquated calendars, and he finally understood. What the heck is this? He sifted through his knowledge of ancient civilizations before coming to the Tenerian calendar. What the heck is Tenerian? Plugging in the numbers as dates, he converted the first half of them over to the Gregorian calendar, and he wasn't prepared for the number it would reveal. His birthday. What? The world spiraled around him. With sweaty palms, he calculated the remaining numbers and gave him another date, a day. The code, it was about Jonah at this location at this moment. His hand shook, his heart pounded against his ribs. Was he part of a prophecy, or had someone led him down this path? He didn't know, and for once numbers no longer made sense. A heavy fatigue came over him, and the world shifted in impossible ways. He knew the equations behind nature. He knew what he saw couldn't be. He witnessed his father's mangrove beyond the desert and felt overwhelming comfort. Crows cawed in the distance, and the smell of citrus wafted on the breeze. He considered that he was once more a child, and the numbers nothing but a horrible dream. Trapped in nostalgic thoughts, he didn't notice the dark fog seeping from the grass, swirling its way towards him. Crows flew from the branches, screeching relentlessly, flying in a circle above. It was too late when he realized the scent of the breeze was no longer citrus, it was blood. Oh, I know all of y'all like pained to have me read this, but I'm so glad that I did. Both of these lore to have ticked off some parts of it. Carmina embattled with the Black Veil and causing problems for them. The ghost town in Chile from the old abandoned mining town. Yeah! Oh, I'm gonna call this one a win. All right, here we go. Overcome. Read the killer lore again. Oh, so you can... What? No, overcome. You've calculated how much energy you can risk to expend. When you are injured, you retain the movement speed bonus for 2 seconds longer. Overcome causes exhausted status effect for 60 seconds. Overcome cannot be used when exhausted. Okay, corrective action. You quickly analyze a problem and correct others' works when they make a mistake. You start the trial with 1 token and gain a token up to a maximum of 5 for every great skill check. When a survivor fails a skill check while cooperating with you, 1 token is consumed and their failed skill check becomes a good skill check. I'm checking your work. That's funny. Boon exponential. When it seems like your number is up, you consider ways to recalculate the odds. All survivors within the boon totem's range recover 90% faster and can completely recover from the dying state. Oh, this is like if you go down in the Boon Totem, you're gonna get like unbreakable multiple times? Okay.
It's a Gen Rush life for us. It's a Gen Rush life for us. Set a hiding, we do gens. Set a randoms, we got friends. It's a Gen Rush life.